So whenever you get movies or concepts of somebody with a greater intelligence giving people with a lower intelligence, whether it be the movie Alien or Prometheus or whatever, whenever there's a higher intelligence giving energy or information to a lower intelligence, the higher intelligence always pays the price, because that ceremonially is the allegory of Prometheus bound on Mount Tartessus, which was the entry into so-called hell in the what they call Greek, which is really Macedonian or Minoan or any of the Peloponnesian cultures that they refer to now as Greek. And therefore, in the enemy's hands, it's a story or a way to bring about the appeal of the super enhanced, to show the fragility of the human so-called psyche and how weak and whatever we are, when we're really the epitome of what it means to be the apex on this earth. Yet if the lion doesn't believe it's a lion, then it's going to act like a whatever it's convinced itself it is. You know what I'm saying? Right. So in all of the modern world, the expression of the futility of the Western civilization is based upon the underlying need to see it destroyed. You know what I'm saying? Like, I saw Independence Day in the movie, and when the saucer came and no, was it Independence Day or was it yeah, Independence Day too, but I think it was the day after tomorrow or something. And when the wave came and hit like the towers and the White House and all of that, people, it was just, things was destroyed. People was running for their lives and all that. In the movie, everybody in the movie theater was cheering. You know what I'm saying? Like, I never forget one of the dudes in the theater. I mean, when the wave came, was catching everybody. He was like, "Surf's up," and everybody broke out laughing and shit. But I say that to say that there's a need for humanity to break out of its so-called primitive bond, which it really exists in its mind. You know what I'm saying? It exists in the limitation that it puts on itself. Hence, masks, for instance. You know what I'm saying? as a part of the societal decay that goes into the decline of any societal power after it's reached its summit. You know what I'm saying? So whenever stuff happens like that and people start really cheering for the end of something, then what is to begin after that is not that far away. So what you have is people mistaking tradition, or what people perceive as tradition, as solely patriarchal, right? So we're talking about, in essence, we're talking about philosophy to a degree right now. So we're talking about the avarice within the mind of the individual that lives in the society to do what they can to exist within it, either by contributing to it or taking away from it. You know what I'm saying? That's why homeless people are reviled by everybody, because they have chosen to opt out but still be physically seen. You see what I'm saying? So if for instance, none of the coronavirus, there was no epidemic of homeless people allegedly dying from it. And when you have a so-called pandemic or something where you have a 99.5 survival rate, that's not what the physical paper, what the mainstream is saying it is. You see what I'm saying? It has to be the opposite. It can't be seen as that. When they're telling you that they're trying to label any death as that, that means they're trying to build numbers to justify an outcome that doesn't exist, that only exists really in the mind. Now, I'm not saying people are not dying, right? What I'm saying, yeah, here's paper. Oh. What I'm saying is that those that are dying from aggravated circumstances, from preconditions that have already been put into arrest based upon whatever errant thing they put out there to enhance the ability to not allow somebody to heal. When people forget we live in a society where everything is compounded to not give us the knowledge we need to overcome it. What did the high elect in certain ancient societies do? And it got to a point where they just couldn't deal with what was going on. They left. You know what I'm saying? What happens when people in the ghetto reach a certain level of money or whatever? What do? They leave. You see what I'm saying? So there's a need when one can't thrive where they at, they basically move into something else. And in that migration is where the individuals are left open for foreign occupation. That's where they are left open because now they're not in their own mind state. They're in a state of survival. But to do that, they have to travel through many different realms. And each realm will inevitably change them in some way that may alter what they left for, what they was trying to preserve in the first place. This is why people can't, it's hard for you to maintain any real upward mobility in the so-called black community because the black community is divided on what it is to be black or what black is. See what I'm saying? And because they all serve different aspects of Rome, they can't unify behind a central idea. Because the minute they do, there's some other black person coming in and trying to emotionally get them to doubt their choice, which then means that they never follow through. But the ones that follow through are usually the ones that unify with another nation. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah, everybody was cheering, laughing. You get what I'm saying? Like, so when we talk about Soros, for instance, like we're talking about an individual, yes, but we're also talking about an individual that really exists in pictures and in the mind that is projected to us from what it is we've researched about this individual. But this individual is a part of a greater network that is manipulating the aspect of the so-called black community that has been undecided as to what it is. You know what I'm saying? So there can really be no unity. You cannot unify when you have no center, no base to unify behind. Because if I'm saying I'm Moorish American and he's saying he's black, and then because he's black, he's trying to diss me for being Moorish when he don't understand what that is, or this person is so gung-ho in being Indian, he doesn't understand the term Indian country and what that really applies to, we become at odds. Whereas Caucasian people are fighting more about how they are going to basically hand over power. That's where they are. How they are going to relinquish power and still save face in the world as the dominant when that can no longer be. You understand? So that's a good question. So, okay, let's get in. He asked, when did white people exist or whatever? Right. Half of these individuals that we refer to as Bill Gates, as Zuckerberg, as these things are modulations of basic clones. Like they don't exist in the idea that they are real people anymore. The real Bill Gates, the real whatever, has probably been dead for years. You know what I'm saying? We don't know what we're seeing because everything is manipulated. So the minute somebody says this is true, you have to automatically like do the knowledge to it. And then historically back it up with the narrative that applies to your people, not the narrative that was implied on your people. You understand what I'm saying? So you talked about Rome, right? So this is an old Moorish plus lesson. I believe it's from the Clock of Destiny, but I'll check. But let me get this. This we're talking about Rome. Okay. Okay, when we're speaking about Rome, we have to speak of it in phases. You know what I'm saying? And because we've been taught that the Roman state, the Roman Republic, the Roman this, the Roman that, and you know, with the movies and the white people with the red capes and all of that, we're not looking at things from the perspective of things being what they were based upon the time, the climate, and the people. You know what I'm saying? It's not because we want to say, oh, all these people are black. Because when you make it that all of these people were so-called white, you naturally evoke the energy to produce the opposite dynamic. You understand? So the very instance of them creating things to look black or white, or to what was appeared black to now be white, created the reality by which that would have to be disproven at some point. You understand what I'm saying? This is the law of cause and effect. What we're doing today is not trying to disprove anything, because the proof is what it is. We've already shown and proved that most of these so-called original people that they talking about was European, that came over in the first times or whatever, that they themselves were not Caucasian. So when we talk about the so-called slave that was imported from ancient times now, we're talking about somebody else. And the only people on earth who had the term slave or the Slav applied to them were the people today who refer to themselves as Caucasian, which by definition would mean Caucasus Asian, right? Meaning sequestered Asian, right? Or what we refer to as whites, W-I-G-H-T. Okay, so in the old lesson it says the battles there were many wars and battles which took place between the Asiatic Muslim nation and the European Christian nation. These wars, though rarely discussed, have had a profound effect on the world and every person. These are some of those wars. The first Punic War, 264 to 241. The second Punic War, 218 to 202. The third Punic War, 149 to 146. The Punic Wars were waged between the Moors and the Romans. The Moors brought the battles to the doorstep of the Roman Empire, and Carthage was the Moorish city empire from which the battles were launched. So we get Hannibal, Hamilcar, Barca, Hasdrubal, the whole Barca, what they call the Lion family, Carthage. The Punic is Latin and Phoenician. Phoenician means Canaanite people. The Canaanites we know were the Moors. So we're watching the continuation, right? And now the separation of these people from these new people that's referring to themselves as Romans, okay? So we're talking about Greco-Roman, and we'll see how this applies today and how people are racially categorized and how most of them are the opposite of what they say they are. The golden skin race of the Greco-Roman Egypt is its environments and arose in history in the union of black and so-called white parents, right? But when we say white, we're talking about these original Slavs they was taken out and pulling out of the caves in what they call Circassia, because that's where all of the Slavs was coming from, as well as the 6 hills in what they call the Caucasus. The child of this mixed couple would resemble any Greek or Roman Egyptian of this pair. So this is the so-called mulatto, so-called octoroon gene that they was trying to cultivate. So this again was to, what they say, bring out the human bouquet of people based upon Rome's now ascendancy. But these Romans that you're seeing here, when we talk about the Roman Egyptian unification, we're going back now to the time in which these so-called guys really came from these guys. Okay. So you can't talk about Rome without talking about Ethiopia and Sabia, of course, which was one of the satellite kingdoms of that. One of the greatest kings of that era was Ezania. Okay, Ezania basically extended his empire from what we see as Ethiopia today down into what they call South Africa, which is why at one time they said the original name of that period of the country at that time was Ezania, right? Look it up. So the Zulus and them came there later. Yeah, there was something on in the paper a little while ago when that guy Julius Malema was trying to act like he was going to do something. He put it out there that they wanted to go back to the original name, change it from South Africa to Azani. But, you know, that got buried when they started dealing with all of the, where we going to kick the white people out and all of this other nonsense. So King Ezania II of the Aksumite Ethiopian Empire, see, became one of the first nations to become the Christian state in 33 AD. Now do the knowledge to that. When was the Punic Wars going down? The latest one went down, right, from ancient times all the way up to 146. So right after this period, right, what was left of the Roman contingent basically went back into Egypt, excuse me, what they call now Ethiopia, based upon them originally coming from India, and then established, moved the original kingdom, and under this guy, basically adopted Roman, what we would today call Coptism, which is really ancient Roman Christianity. See, look, one of the oldest surviving Christian nations in the world. The 7 Christian monuments date back to King Ezania's time, which Tahaka Mariam, the cathedral, and Saint Mary of Zion, one of the oldest Christian cathedrals on earth, which existed 300 years before the religion of Islam, right? And 700 years before Christianity was brought to Europe by North African missionaries. Islam, do the knowledge to that. What's up with that? Where was the oldest church founded? The oldest Christian church in the United States was established by Moroccan, i.e., North African missionaries, right? Right. See what I'm saying? Thanks, babe. See what I'm saying? It came from over here. They brought that Christianity, right? They brought that from over here. Because this goes back now to the ancient Roman period when, like I said, Rome itself, before the Punic War, before the first Punic War, the first mothers of Rome came from Sabia, which was the satellite kingdom of Ethiopia, right? In which the mothers of that settled in what we call Italy after they created the colony. That colony was Rome. You understand? Because there was nobody Christian from. That's why when they stopped being pagan, what did they do? They went into being Christian, right? Right? This is before white people was running anything. Just before any of that, any of this stuff talking about with white Christianity, or I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about back when the icons and everything was still black. But then there's this. Now it says that this started before Islam, right? But then we have this. Find it. Give me 1 second. I thought I pulled it out. So this guy, so these guys are just manifesting this old tech. I'm sorry, I thought I pulled this. Okay, so look, this is Phoenician. On your on your left hand side is the Phoenician glyph that represents the Hannibalian or the Carthaginian supremacy. This is the, and then on your right is the, or was the, well, is the Great Seal, which at one time represented the original capital and how it looked. Let's see what I'm saying. So this is what was on the money back in the days. But when we was there, this eye was lower, if it was there at all. On the original joints, there was no eye. It was just the actual step. Okay, and as you can see, the elephant, again, which is reminiscent from the ancient Hindu in the form of Ganesh, right? So Carthage over on that side of the world basically held sway over this area, which happened to be the same area that Rome held sway over and the Moorish Empire over there had sway over successively. And this, again, is connected to all of us northwest of all of this, us over here. So what we see as Italy is really a satellite colony of old Ethiopia through what they call Sabia. And then there was another offshoot of those people called the Nabateans, who existed in what we today present day call Yemen, and the people that's there is descended from them. They're not trying to wipe them out. But when we look at the ancient iconography of Christianity, right? For instance, this is Santa Claus on your left, on your right, excuse me. And then this on your left is the king and queen of the Holy Roman Empire, Lord Otto and Edith. Now remember, in Europa, there was no Rome. I mean, there was no so-called Europe as we understand it. These were all descendants of these Roman Christians. This is Santa Claus. This is St. Nicholas, right? These are the founders. These are the two king and queen that asked permission from the Moors to reestablish the Holy Roman Empire and did so. You know what I'm saying? St. Nicholas was the one that used to bring the toys to the children in Freesing when the Vatican was up there. And the empire in the Holy Roman Empire was protected by a group of knights called the Papen or the Wappenheim or the Pappenheim, depending on how you pronounce it. These were also the chocolatiers, the ones that created all of the Bavarian Mohrenkampf chocolate heads that the white people eat today and act like they invented. This is the reason why the whites over there dress up and paint their faces and dress up like the Moors that used to live there. Because they inherited all of that from them. All that renewable energy stuff that they doing now, Iceland and Norway, they picked that up. That was the stuff they stopped during the Industrial Revolution when they ran all the Moors and the people up out of it. However, the Renaissance never touched Russia. And so they were able to keep all the ancient Roman, i.e., Greek Orthodox, Ethiopian Orthodox. It's all Christianity. There's 5 dons above the Pope. The Pope is just the Bishop of Rome. The head of the 5 dons is, the front man is the Greek Latvian Orthodox dude, but the dude pulling the strings is the Ethiopian patriarch. Islam. So when we're talking about Christianity and taking Christianity away from black people, you gotta understand a lot of these black people today descend from black people who was ancient Romans. See what I'm saying? Who practiced Christianity and paganism anyway. So that's in them. So really, all they really did was just switch what the image of Christ was to give them a head start over niggas that didn't remember that all of these icons was originally black. You understand? So it's not so much about hiding history. It's about creating the Renaissance or creating the period to whitewash everything. These on your left represent the ancient highway, superhighway at the Temple of the Sun in Tehuantepec, right? And then on your left is Vatican City. This is where was also a runway. You got to read books about the real Native American, the real ancient Americans that they're not talking about, like the Chaco people, or the there's a book I'll show you. It's a book called Chaco Astronomy. Get this book. Talk about the Chaco people. Chaco people. Also the Anasazi, the real Anasazi, the ones that was with the blue and the red Kachina, the ones connected to the Popo Val. Read that, the Popo Val. Get that too. And you'll read about what the Nazca lines and these things that these TV shows like Ancient Aliens and should be trying to speculate on, when you could just read what we used it for. These was runways. We was so huge at one point that you only seen things aerially. So if there was a spider this way, that corresponded to whatever people that you could get to by dealing with the totem of the spider. Same thing with the guy with the big club and all of that. Like all of these were like giant, as if you will, crop circles on, but really ley lines or like runways for you to do your thing. That's why all of these joints at the top is leveled off. Understand? But because we live under Caucasian people, they told us that right people, see, the right people, the right brothers, see what I'm saying? The right brothers was the ones that did this in Connecticut or whatever. Ohio, excuse me. Kitty Hawk. Right? But peep game, this is the Kitty Hawk. Which is basically the Cooper Falcon, which is Heru, the American bird found over here, transported when the Egyptian/Romans decided they was going to go back over to the old world and give them this version of Christianity. And then they dwelt there for a couple of thousand years, and then they decided to then go up into their colony, in which was Rome. And then through Rome, they took over everything. This is why Ethiopia itself was never invaded, because it was sponsoring all of the invasions through its European colony that we'll call Rome. And Carthage wasn't having it. So Rome, the Roman Praetorian Guard, had a tendency to use the wild Germanians, Caucasians, as brute force, what they call cannon fodder, and would fight against and would use them, and it would give them tracts of land to be on, the same way Genghis did to those that came over here with him. You understand? This is a painting by Dido called The Building of Carthage. Okay. And this Carthage was an empire of tremendous cities that were built from the ancient times to now. This is in New Mexico. So the way to take the people out of where they are is to just remove the historical context and then change the complexion of what they're looking at. You know what I'm saying? These are the ancient Sauk people from the Sauk nation, what we call Black Hawk, out of today what we call Chicago, right? And then on your left and then on your right is one of their descendants from Chicago. You tell me.
Thank you.
Yes. Right. Because these are old Sauk. Black Hawk. Read about Black Hawk's War. That's the same war. That's the continuation of the same war. The original government was fighting against the interlopers from the north jurisdiction. But when I'm talking about the north and the south jurisdiction, see, when they're talking to you about the north, the war between the north and the south, right? You got to understand what they're really talking to you about. They're not talking about geographic location per se. Yeah, because they are. It's just one is from the late 1800s, and then the largest from the 1900s. But they even got the same clothes on, because that's how the Black Hawks would dress. Like if we was around in that, we would think that the Black Hawks was like the NOI back then. You know what I'm saying? So when they're talking about the North and the South historically, and the war between the North and the South, they're really talking about this North and South. The northern and the southern jurisdiction. This was what the war was really about and who it was between. Yes. But look at the South. See, when you think about the South, you only think about this. You only think about this part right here. But the South means all of this. Because all of this was a part of North, Central, and South America, according to the annexation of Texas document, right? of 1845 that said that all of the lands belong to the ancient Mauritanians, who are who? The ancient Carthaginians. Because they were the ones that established the American Republic, the Republic for which it stands, because Carthage was a republic. Remember? Everybody say that Haiti was the first republic, but black republic, but actually the first black republic in the world was Carthage. And these ancient Carthaginians trace their lineage back from the ancient Canaanites, ancient Canaanites, who themselves were part Moabite, right? So these Ethiopians themselves, who originally derived from India through Axum, after moving the capital, right, were able to establish themselves as the dominant portion in that part of the world, right? Saint Clement is said to have known Saint Peter, Saint Luke, and Barnabas, and even Saint Paul personally, and even traveled with them on several occasions. After Saint Peter and his first two successors, Linnaeus and Cletus, were martyred, he appointed the Bishop of Rome. He was appointed Bishop of Rome and third successor to Saint Peter. So he became the fourth pope. So you mean to tell me that the fourth pope was black, but the first three was white? That's what y'all telling us? And he was the one that brought forth the idea of what became known as clemency for those martyrs who had fought in the wars against the great barbarian hordes, i.e. Carthage, i.e. the Moors, i.e. Tartary. And those who did atrocities in those wars would receive clemency from the Pope, the Bishop of Rome, who himself was just the Bishop of Italy, who paid its tribute to the real Rome, which was Ethiopia. So what I'm also trying to expand our minds and understand is that this whole thing of worshiping idols and stuff like that, this was left over in these people when they got chased out of out of India by the Mero people of the Murian and the Chandragupta, who was Muslim and wasn't with what they was doing with all the cows and all that, and all of the polytheism stuff. So they took their polytheism stuff, and then under Ezania, established themselves now as Christians, which was just another way. And then through their Christian thing, they could still have all of their icons. You see what I'm saying? And now consolidate themselves in Europe against us. Remember the story of Saint Maurice when he came across the white people in the cave worshiping the black people, worshiping the black Christ, and then he didn't want to kill them? And then him and his soldiers got decimated, and then that's how he became a saint. Yes, because they would worship us. We was their God. So that had to switch in the new paradigm. So now we get into so-called Aboriginal Masonry. So this war with the Christians, what I'm telling you is that the Christians is your own people. The only difference between the Christians and the Carthaginians was the Carthaginians was following the old covenant, which manifested from the ancient all the way up to the modern. See what I'm saying? On your right, on your left is the sacred hoop, or the sacred symbol of the Tesalagi, who they call the Ananuia, or the Pitoko, also connected to the Greeks, who are also Mayans. So when Mexicans call black people Mayate, Chiqui Moate, Mayate, right? Mayate mean Mayan. Just like Muli, when the Wops when the Italians they call us Guineas or Moolies. Well, they call you Muli if they trying to diss you for being a Muslim. They call you Guinea if they trying to diss you from having the blood of the original Italians, who are the Ethiopians. Islam. We will see in a minute. So when the prophet said the European came over here, whatever, he never said the Europeans was white. He said that they followed the pale gods of Europe, because that was the mind frame that the Ethiopians was using. The Sabean and Roman oligarchy that became the Venetian oligarchy, which then became, well, we'll get into all of that in a minute. Anyway, this right here is the sacred hoop or symbol for the fire keepers, the Moors in Cherokee. This was also the flag that the dude playing the Moor in the movie Hidalgo flew to represent the Cherokee Nation. Remember that? He went to race the Moors in Morocco. Viggo Mortensen, who also was married to Asiatic. So this is what it means. White is the north, which is the air, the animals who receive the energy, the mental aspect, the wisdom. West is the black, the earth, the physical holds the energy, right? Just shows you that the original man, right, is in the black. Then the south is the red, right, where the water and the plains gives the energy, the emotional aspect, the trust and the innocence, whereas the east is yellow. See? And this is what they identify all of the races through, isn't it? The yellow man is the Asian man, right? The white man is in the north from the Caucasus, right? The black man's from the original West, right? Then the red man represents the so-called mixture of the black man and the so-called mestizo. Those people were called zombos in the Midwest. The zombo. So all of these are black, including the one in the north, because the people coming from the north also was coming from Europa, right? And those were black people from the Holy Roman Empire, right? And then in the middle is the green, which is the center, the self-balance, the harmony, right? But now peep this. This is how the white man used it. This is now from the Church of the Lima. This is on their altars. These Black Lives Matter people that's out here and all of that wilding, a lot of these kids grow up in these satanic families, and this is the symbol that's on their altar. So ritualistically, what they use against you is the power of your ignorance. The Black Lives Matter is a perfect example of how they hijacked it. The same way the white women hijacked it in the 60s. Then after that, the Jews hijacked it from them. Hijacked it, you see what I'm saying? Now the Black Lives Matter people is hollering at, because now when you say black or Black Lives Matter, you're really talking about these Caucasian, white, transgender, and black, transgender, gay, LGBT, pro-pedophile people. Drag queen story time is agreed upon pedophilia, socializing the child to accepting something that to the child is actually demonic, because they see the purity of what is happening to them, whereas adults just rationalize it away because they're crazy. So at the fall of our situation, like for example, this is also showing you that there's also Carthages all over the United States. Like here, trying to make it bigger. So to celebrate the removal of us from the top, they put in their iconography, in their imagery, a similar type of image, starting with this one you've seen before. Here you see a romanticized version of the Moors placating to the Roman Europeans. Okay. And then here you see it again in the image of in which you have the French rising above the original so-called French or Moorish aristocracy. And then here you have the same thing with the patriots, all battle-hardened, playing a song that is supposed to represent them as a nation that they didn't become until 1791, until maybe 100 years after. You see what I'm saying? All to celebrate the denationalization. But then there's this. The problem is when you actually do understand what happened historically and what these people and these flags and these nations represent and how they correspond to you, you first get to the understanding that one, all of the stuff that they talk about biblically happened over here. On your right is, on your left is where the so-called Olmec Maya Empire from the isthmus stretched at its somewhat beginning. And then on your left is from the Book of Mormon, where it talks about the armies of the city of Mulek. See what I'm saying? That's exactly what the French picture represents. Them rising above the brutal Moorish Empire and kept them all enslaved. And then them now instituting the same empire, but in reverse. And then, like I said, historically, going back to 600 to 2000 BC, 2300 BC, when we read about what happens in the Book of Mormon and the Bible in the city of Mulek, as well as the story of Lamech and the Lamanites and these people, all of these are the Moors that today we call ancient Peruvians, ancient Maya. See what I'm saying? It's the same place. So all of this, like I said, had to be rewritten based upon the war between the North and the South jurisdiction. That war culminated between two people, specifically this human excrement and then his lackey next to him. I'll show you these guys. This is Albert Pike and this is Thornton Jackson. These are the conspirators between the northern and the southern jurisdiction, which eventually led to the rise and the equilibrium between the KKK and the so-called Black Christian community. The Muslims being left out of that because the Muslims, they're at eternal war with. But it's easier for them to get the ones that's under the Christian jurisdiction because that's technically them under the jurisdiction of either one of those Masonic orders. As you see around Thornton Jackson's neck, you see the Triple Cross, which is the symbol of the Jesuit order. And at the time, this was, again, Asiatic through the so-called 33rd Prince Hall degree Masonry. This was their connection through Rome. Yes, because they're both Jesuits. They both were what you would call at the time papists. And they were there to rewrite the laws between the Freemasonic agreements so that way the blacks would fall under the presumption of the whites. And the whites would then have reign over the country. While the so-called rich blacks would, do what they needed to do in secret, away from the greater population for a certain amount of time. At least that's how allegedly it went. And so they gave the white boys the fake ritual with the real ritual with the fake secret. The fake ritual with the real secret, and they gave the black boys the fake ritual, the real ritual with the fake secret. And Pike was then connected through that Thelemic order, what became the Theosophic Society, through Blavatsky, who herself was a slave as a nursemaid or whatever in the noble houses of those Moors from Europa. This was the flag of, on your left, the conglomerate flag or banner of the Holy Roman Empire and the different houses, Moorish houses associated with them. And then on your left and then on your right is the original crest of the Republic. This, I think, is still in St. Paul's, in the ceiling of St. Paul's Chapel in New York. And as you can see, it is not an eagle. It's a wild turkey. This is the wild Turk, or the mystic Turks, or the Turk, right, or the Turkey of the West. This is its cousin from Europa, who basically played both sides, right? And then in between them, like I said, then it's like the Khan in them. So when we read about this, 18 USC 1151. Now remember, the Crusades started when? When did the Crusades start? 11th century, right? Exactly. That's the first crusade. The second crusade started when? 11th century. Because these crusades were the continuations of the Punic Wars. Understand? Same war. This is why Alexander the Great invaded Egypt and them at the behest of Philip, because Philip was the vassal king under who? Hannibal. So in shutting down Egypt by way of that way, he was able to get in or shut down Abyssinia, which at that time was now in bed with Babylonia, through Byzantine. Except as otherwise provided in sections 1154 and 1156, they give you the time frame of the crusade when they took the land in the first place. You see what I'm saying? Encoded it. This is what the code is, right? As used in the chapter, means a land within the limits of any Indian reservation under the jurisdiction of the United States government, notwithstanding the issuance of any patent and including rights of way running through reservation, all dependent Indian communities within the borders of the United States, whether within the original or subsequently acquired territory, therefore, and whether within or without the limits of a state, and all Indian allotments, land, and Indian titles to which have not been extinguished, including the rights of way running through the same. So you see how they still put themselves in it while at the same time giving you the out. What and whether within or without the limits of a state. See how ambiguous that is? Now apply that to the land. I was seated. Look at the tribes, or the so-called tribes, that's allotted. These are the ones that were of the original Moorish bloodline. You think that's a coincidence? How come you ain't put Lakota in there? How come you ain't put Hopi in there? They out there. So that means technically all of this is reserved land for the descendants of these people, which we are, because we have the blood descent now to prove it, and because the Supreme Court said that they can't keep any so-called black people, whatever, out. That means so long as you have title and the ability to establish a state. See that? Yes, a state and all Indian allotments. Now remember, Indian was just the term that they used that. But now when you talk about Indian country, you're talking about anything with the so-called reservation or border, right? But look, this is where they get tricky, where you says within the borders of the United States. The United States borders is only within the jurisdiction of Washington. You see? This is where treaty now comes in, right? Because the treaty is what they recognize of 1866. But remember that all of those treaties are predicated on the surrender of Grenada, that transferred the term black, Negro, or colored, or Indian to us to hide the original title holder based on the treaty, right? We can even trace it back to the guy that actually put it in the record, whose name is, let me get it. Let me see. Professor Hanlon informs us that the legislatures in Virginia sought to cover up the record of white bondage and its equivalence to Negro servitude. The compiler of the Virginia laws codifying black slavery for the first time then takes its liberty of altering text to bring earlier legislation into line with its own new notions. For examples, the alterations to insert the word slave as a reference to blacks in Virginia when it had not been used to describe them in that way before. So it was a guy named Hanlon out the Virginia legislature after the Bacon Rebellion that decided to, after the Anthony Johnson verdict, to basically, way after the Anthony Johnson verdict, decided to establish this new form in which now other Asiatics that were or were not from the original Union could be enslaved, thus separating them from their original treaties. Right? This is the book I was talking about. Check that out. Because now they're trying to switch the dates for the zodiac signs now. They're trying to just displace you, move you out of position. Trying to now flip up your birthday, flip up to this, flip up to that, all to just get you away from your original self. Because they can't be themselves. This is a great book to get on what happened and really was going on in 1812. Which again relates to all of that because all of the instituted laws came in after. And that's around the time when Caucasian people started being brought in as mercenaries now, being freed through abolitionists to now fight for freedom on the behalf of the so-called black aristocracy. They themselves being originally from Europe or Europa as the nobility to then create a compatibility between them and the assumed break between so-called poor blacks and poor whites. Okay. Oh, yeah. So this so-called trade that they're talking about that's happening with these people are all basically descendants of the same people that was running this from time immemorial. Oh, this is another thing. The other reason why they always hated Cuba or Cubanacan was due to its underside, which is this. This is under. And when they really did the radio sonar thing, like I discussed in the beginning, they found it basically goes down for miles.
What are you getting, sweetie? I wouldn't mind if you clean.
This is the UN headquarters, and this again was the allegorical picture of the Tower of Babel when they tried to build it the first time to basically rule the world from. So this is not something that these people just invented for themselves. This is something that's been going on, and what we've been systematically stopping over and over for as long as we can remember. And that's also the problem. So now people are waking up to all of this. So now, like I said, this chick who they arrested is now singing and revealing different aspects of this alleged human trafficking ring that spans the planet. Yet the real culprits is still striving to push this agenda through. So it goes either way. However, at the root of all of this stuff, when we speak of Jesuits like that, we're really speaking of the so-called crypto Jewish mafia, who in America were at one point working in tandem with the so-called Roman Italian mafia. So they were basically the muscle, if you will, but they were the accountants and stuff like that for these people, who themselves were all under the Omerta Manzini programming that goes all the way back to Ignatius Loyola and the conversion of those Moors, those first generation of Moors that fell to the Italians through Reconquista and the Inquisition. And so this technique of breaking people and then implanting popism in them became the subject. And so they themselves are all Talmudic Jews. The Talmud is the document that they received or conceived at Babylon and was transcribed by Crowley into what became the Kabbalistic Encyclopedia and Book of the Law and stuff like that. So because we represented the Black Death to them for ages, Rome did not exist. And as the world brought itself out of darkness and into the light of, humanity and understanding and virtue and all of that, these Moors fell from their noble nature and then allied themselves with the Christian kings of Europe and basically allowed their wars to then be fought by proxy by these beings, all at the behest of these original so-called Jews that were using these Yahuds that were now following the Talmudic text to, manifest and bring them their money. And eventually they wind up succumbing to them, like anybody would. And so they created a perpetual system through fascism that we call white supremacy, that would then not only conceal the true identity of who we are, but then harvest the material, spiritual, and psychic energy of those of us that go to them to get the real knowledge. See the feathers in the hand being dangled in front of you, along with your pyramid and your star. That's the sun, moon, and star.
I have this stuff to roll, please.
They all do, but Trump just signed an order that forbids them from using baby parts and stuff like that anymore, allegedly. Of our Moors from Facebook sent me this. This is from the movie Birth of a Nation. Big up to him. Spotting this. Look, they caught the black man and then found his fez. See what I'm saying? This was in the movie. Because this would have represented the people running the government. This was the symbol for Tammany Hall. You understand? This is the movie that put the Klan on the map and then follow suit by getting all the Caucasian people to then emulate what they were seeing in that movie, to combat the real cinema that was going on through people like Oscar Marshall and all the other artists that represented America at the time. And then they started the smear campaign of the minstrel shows and getting Negroes to sell out and do all types of whack music to degrade us, make us look crazy. And then from there, started to use Hollywood to then promote Caucasian people as what America is and how they created the new country through Westerns and John Wayne and all of that other crap. See what I'm saying? Marketing. This is Aleph Lam Lam Ha, which is Allah. The Temple of Abydos, thousands of years before even Christianity existed. So as we read with Ellisbon, how he flipped it, this now goes back even before them. To show and prove that Islam did not even begin in what we received, what we were told it began as. That's where the religion that resurfaced from the original culture that already exists throughout the world, that we Moors had already been practicing as the high priest of Anu. So those of us that existed or exist in what they call Indian country are those of us who understood the difference between what they refer to as the frontiersmen and these type of people. All them people were black. Everybody was basically black until. You understand? Think about this. The lady on the left, right? You mean to tell me that they was enslaving her? You think she the only one that looked like that? They was enslaving her? No. So she a slave. So they made her this dress? This is her slave. That's what's really going on, bro. That's what was really going on. The abolitionists were black people that were trying to fight the universal slavery that the Slovaks had always been in. And the white abolitionists were the ones that were trying to free themselves. But it had gotten to such a degree that anybody could be enslaved. And so it had to be stopped. But this is what led to the present human trafficking situation that everybody's dealing with today. Read A Forgotten Cause of the Civil War. It lays it all out. Everything that we're dealing with, all of the banks that they're dealing with, Bank of America, Citibank, all of these banks were reinvention of these now taking over Roman banks that were now being put under these white decoys to run everybody that was going to be under the jurisdiction of Washington, D.C. And then they basically just extended that jurisdiction to everybody. They were real mercenaries like those at Zama, for they inhabited the most westerly portion of the Numidian kingdoms, Morocco, and were certainly perfectly independent of Carthage, and it is known even that they had an alliance with Carthage at this date. The Balearians were probably in the same position. The Balearians had served as mercenaries for Carthage from early date. So what Carthage would do was it would make deals with other people, and if they were falling in debt, they would ask that certain members of those people's warrior clan would work with them in the expansion of the empire. So these expansions, these deals and everything is how everything went down and basically happened. You know what I'm saying? This is when they were talking about the Hellenistic mercenaries. This is from a book called The Peloponnesian Wars. Yeah, if you can. I'm gonna try to get a PDF version of it and put it on the website, people, so they can get it. What else was I gonna say? Check this book out too. Something else. Oh, yeah, when they talking about Sir Francis Drake, there's an old rendition of him showing his Rosicrucian affiliation. As you see, he's a so-called Spaniard, i.e. mulatto, i.e. so-called black man. Yeah, because like I said, all of these people were basically black up until the late 1900s. And these people that's running stuff today is like the remnants of these people they've been seeking to hide and bleach out. What else we got? This is how they would do Moors. This is how they do them today. You might have seen this one before, but it's a classic example. This is a Zombo. This is what happened after. His father was a Moor, his mother was a dark-skinned mestizo, or light-skinned mestizo. But look around his chest. See the crosses? But this is before he was a Christian. But This is before he's a Christian. This is him as a Christian now, but this is him before that. So this represent all of the different Christian missionaries, people he done killed before they caught him and turned him into this. See how he got the turban on? So in the Confederacy, he was free, as I said. And this is what I'm saying, because the Europeans, again, they would use the white boys as decoys, and they would make cameos and stuff to celebrate it. This is from the Medici family. See that? See how you got the black face in the front, superimposed over the white one? See that? See what I'm saying? White supremacy was fostered in the so-called mind state by breaking the original princes that descended from the original lines of those clans that had always been against the BS. It's all of these wars, the Indian wars, the Black Hawk War, the this war, it's all the same war. So that's what I'm saying. This is what's still going on. You know what I mean? So we have to be vigilant in our research and, you know, checking and double checking and reading about certain people, because certain things can't be switched. So like if you're gonna research a president or whatever, research the guy that actually did portraits and stuff like that on him, or his specific photographer, and then read about how he described the person. You'll bug out. They'll actually say stuff like, oh yeah, he was mad dark skinned, like in talking about Teddy Roosevelt, he was mad dark skinned. I mean, he was, you know, light of skin or whatever. He always rode a certain horse. Why would Roosevelt allow Duke Ellington to stay at on his estate? Why did Madam C.J. Walker live next door to Rockefeller when it was against the law for white people, no matter how much money, whatever they had, for you to live next to them like that? Unless something else was going on. That's all I'm saying. We can't always look at it for what they telling us it is. Because these Europeans, again, have been playing this game for a long time. So the original stock of Europe, as we close out, is what they call the Grimaldi. The Grimaldi family is the oldest Moorish family of Europa. This is where these are the ones that was in before everybody in Europa when it was still giants and stuff there. Before Britain came and slew Albion, the giant. The Grimaldi family is the oldest Moorish family. It descends from the Grimaldi Asiaticus. Right? The noble house began with the Genoese statement at the time of the early Crusades. He might have been the son of the Otto Canella, a consul of the Republic of Genoa in 1133. These are the people that was paying for the invasions to come over here and take our money. Look at the dates. Remember, the Indian country date was what? 1151 to 1154, right? So look, this is the time period we're talking about. The consul 1170 to again 1184. His numerous grandsons and their children led maritime expeditions throughout the Mediterranean, the Black Sea, and soon the North Sea. The Grimaldis feared the head of the rival Genoese family could break the fragile balance of power in a political coup and became the Lord of Genoa, which has happened in the other Italian cities. Now remember, these Italians are all black. Think of Ethiopians, but in Italy. Okay? They entered into the GULLIBLE alliance. Now the GULLIBLE was all of the families, the Saxons, the Huguenots, to this, to that. These are all of these families that decided to come over here. The youths were, however, banned from the city in 1271 after the Magna Carta and found refuge in their castles in Liguria and Provence. They signed a treaty with Charles of Anjou. Charles of Anjou was from the House of Corvin, which was the Corvid dynasty that led to who? Dracula, right? And them coming over here and setting up shop where in North Carolina, based on Charles's relationship with Charles V, his great grandfather, right? Who had married into the Inca throne and now had given them North and South Carolina, which became North and South Carolina. And in North and South Carolina, they set up a place called what? Transylvania, to start to mine the gold that's there. Look it up. Because the Crusades was over here, it was them coming over here based on the intercissimus of, based on the verses of 1451. So again, we just proved that the Crusades came over here and they were trying to take our money and our land over here because these were ancient descendants of Rome who consolidated themselves as Judaic Christians when they're really Hindu mystics. So they're following the Talmud too. You ain't never heard Israel say anything about Ethiopia, have you? Matter of fact, didn't they import the Ethiopian Jews out of Ethiopia into Israel? And now they treating them like slaves? So look, Charles of Anjou, from the draconian European states that came over here because they could not practice their bloodletting and stuff and the torture that they was doing to the Europeans, the Caucasian slaves, the slave race. And the king of Naples and the count of Provence to retake control of Genoa, and generally and provide the mutual assistance. In 1276, they accepted peace and under the auspices of the Pope, who himself was black. Everybody's black that we're reading about, which is, however, did not put an end to the civil war. Not all the Grimaldis chose to return to Genoa, as they preferred to settle in fiefdoms where they could raise armies. And these fiefdoms became the European states. You understand? The states of Europe that then set up their colonies over here and then started practicing the same bloodletting and all that stuff over here. This is a Zambo. Okay? And then here's an example of what I was saying with the bloodletting. And they came over here and started marrying into the families and then turning those families into these things, and then started doing the same practice because they were free to practice their religion, and their religion was ancient draconian trans and gothic magic that they had culminated through the Talmud and all of the cultures and stuff that they had hooked that threw together through the Crusades. And then at the same time created banks where after they took the heads and killed everybody or whatever, they could then take their assets and then protect them from the greater Moors that was going to come and take it from them. This is what led to the Barbary Wars. This is why we are now sure they made us sureties under the Sestoui state so long as we wasn't Moroccans. This is why they can take over Black Lives Matter and whatever movement and then inject their foolishness into it, because this is what they always been doing. Look at the dude with the fez. These is royals. Look what they do to these white people. And so the time came where the Moors wanted to abolish all of this. But now they had bonded in, they had married into these people, and then they shielded all of this with Christianity. See what I'm saying? And then all of it's then ran through Rome, right here in the side. Blow it up. See? See? This is why we not. This is why the prophet said we wasn't never called us Muslims. That's why he never did none of that. Yeah. So these are the Draconians. This is what's going to look. This is how in they used to go. They used to have the children hunt these things. This is why they're so crazy with us now. This is why they be trying to eat us now. This is what's going on with them. You see, these Europeans came over here wilding. You see what I'm saying? And then once they adopted and came into the state, and then certain parts of Europe wasn't with it. Certain parts of the Holy Roman Empire wasn't with all that. And instead of kicking them out, these were the electors of the Holy Roman Empire. So we had our own thing over here. We got our own government, still do. So here they go. See the Moors kicking these people out, killing the white people? Because these people were sent by people like him. Frederick III, the wise elder of Saxony, one of the GULLIBLE houses. Defenders, he was the defender of Martin Luther, another black man. They were protesting. They were protesting their place under the Roman Empire because they wanted to be free. So some of them wanted to still uphold that, and then those that left of the line came and melded with the Creoles in the marriage of Louise and Anna. Yeah, so that's what's up. Anybody have any questions? One of the theosophists of the day that was really out there was Samuel Mathers, who was really into the whole scene with them as they were creating their fake little magic cults and all of that. This is his descendant. Name is Samuel Marshall Mathers, I believe. This is Marshall Mathers. So you tell me. Well, that was the state that they wanted to deal with. They were practicing the old Babylonian stuff that they had traded through Rome, through Sabia, through India. And they was always into that doing to get power, like what you seen in Temple of Doom with Kali Ma and all that. That's basically what they was doing. But in Ethiopia, they was more under the Christian thing. But they still had sway through the rest of the world through Byzantine. See what I'm saying? Because Constantine was black. Understand? Like, all you gotta just remember, all these people was black up until the point. The slave race, the slaves, up until the late 1900s, was the white people. Anybody black that was caught up in that was caught up in Reconstruction, which came after the Inquisition, which came after the Re-Inquisition, which came after the Reconquista, which came after the Renaissance. You see what I'm saying? See, this is the Pope. And sometimes you'll get these pictures and you'll see they started to paint them white, but then didn't finish or whatever. So some of these you'll see where there'll be a white man, but then you look at the hands and the feet, they'll be black. But this was the Rome that we were against. These are the Romans in our life were our Freemasonic parents and grandparents, enforcing the Roman Jesuit doctrine through secret, which is really Jewish Talmudism. That's what all of the Muslim, Christian, all of that stuff is really Talmudic, satanic Judaism. and their god is Satan or Lucifer, who they believe will come with them and make everybody a slave, and each Jew will get 20,000, 28,000 slaves from a different race for each one Jew. This is the new world. So as much as you see them hate Jews and all that, they just set all of that up to get rid of the original chosen, to make us forget that it's really us. So now that the lands is coming back, this is why we got to start to prepare by getting our nationality and things like this straight and not get caught up in these fake movements that come out to throw off who and what we are, which are Americans through evolution, you know what I'm saying? But essentially, we're the same ancient Moroccans that have always been here, that helped establish the Republic of America back through Carthage, even though some of us at the time had empires that were independent of that. That's why you see different flags with different shapes on them. This represents Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Muskogee, Seminole. This represents the union of all of them, the 5 points. Then the circle represents the union of the different so-called Algonquin peoples, or the land that the colonies was on. And this represents the historic people, the 48 states and the 13 zones that gave way to the original confederacies, whether it was the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the so-called Cherokee Confederacy, the so-called Monacan Confederacy, the so-called Seneca Confederacy. You understand? That's what the Articles of Confederation was really about. It was all of them coming together and then putting it all into one, let's say, trust. And then these guys came and then injected themselves after. And so those that tended to stay under the original guise of what that was chose to confederate themselves as states and became the Confederate States of America, because they were the majority, see what I'm saying, in the so-called jurisdictional war. See what I'm saying? The South had more people because all of this is the empire. All of this was just the colonies, basically, and the pieces that they had ceded. Exactly. So that's what's really going on. So this human trafficking thing with Jelaine and the Wayfair and all of this is coming out. This is all the same thing that they had been doing through the so-called war. Get the book I told you, Civil War of 1812, because that's when everything went crazy. Between 1812 and 1871. It's when everything got reshaped. And ever since then, we've been living in a fake history, fake understanding, and we have no knowledge of how to put ourselves back with the right republic. And until we do, we'll be still following Roman ideals that put us at odds with what we're saying we're trying to get. You know what I'm saying? So like I said, they be using doubles and all of that. And aside from leaving stuff out of history, they'll just put it in a way where you just won't realize that you're really reading about yourself. But when you talk about Christianity, or what we call the order of Christ, you got to remember, you always talking about, or Christianity, you talking about the Ethiopian sway over the world, the Indian slash the Hindi Ethiopian Sabean Italian sway over the world, who were really all Talmudic Khazars, who used the Talmudic Khazars as they bidding. That's why Ethiopia is the head of the African Union. You know, people not even peeping game. Like, king of Italy was the king of Ethiopia. That's why when it went crazy, he went to England. He didn't go to an African state. He went to another European state because that's the colony that his ancestors set up. And that's why Elizabeth will bow to him. You understand? Nah, they only was really in the places they said they was. But the land that they was on was donated by the 13 original families of those Moors that lived on those lands. On the left side is the Roman icon for God. That's in the church. And again, these are the Ethiopian popes. Get the book, African Presence in Early Europe. You'll see what I'm talking about. So I hope it was informative and you understand that all of the stuff that they're throwing at us is just to throw us away from the fact now that the more we declare and the more we incite treaties, they've set precedent with that through the Indian country thing. So if they honor one, they got to honor the other. Because remember, the 1787 treaty specifically was for us. You can get, again, the Prince Uriel Bay books is good on that. A book called When Nations Gather by Sultan Abdul Latif. It's a good book on that. Any of the Elder Hakeem Bey's literature is great. He's a brother on yeah, any of that is good. That's because Hitler, the original Hitler, again, like all the original Germans, was black. And as crazy as it sounds, most of the stuff that we ever have seen about World War I and World War II was staged. I showed that. I showed the people in a couple of videos ago where they was walking with the fake tanks, with the hollow tanks and the hollowed out airplanes and all of that, and they walk in the streets with them. They created a world and then put us in it through movies. That's why Hollywood is at the center of all of this garbage that's happening to the world, because they literally put the world into a strait where any of these nations post World War II can now eradicate the original black population and hold on to the equity in the land. What you think happened to all these black business owners and stuff? They lynched and stuff and then ran their family off the land. Where they estate go to? Who got the land? The niggas that lynched them. This was about money. Remember, Hollywood started in Florida with the Jewish mob. And the Jewish mob hooked up with the Irish mob through Kennedy and Giancana. And those Jews were also rebels that were fighting on behalf of Rothschild and them to eventually establish a state of Israel that at the time they thought was going to be in China. Once they realized it wasn't going to be in China, they was going to take it over by the 60s through the Balfour Agreement that the Rothschilds created and imposed on the people. The Jewish mafia worked with the Italian mafia to get rid of everybody in the way. And because they worked so well together, the Italians basically thought they had them in their pocket. So around the 70s, 80s, late 80s, 90s, you see people like Marty Scorsese and the rest of them making all these movies about the mafia. At the same time, they all going to jail. This was because the mafia, the Jewish mafia, had got them to a point where they could wrangle themselves away from the Italians, right, through their Jesuit connection, and then go directly to Israel, get their backing through Mossad, and then they use them to break them and then take all of their businesses. And then they made movies about how they did it. Robert De Niro's a Jew. Al Pacino's a Jew. All of these people are Jewish who are fascist Jews. They're crypto-fascist Jews who are satanic Talmudic Freemasons. You understand? But all of that descends from the union between the House of Anjou, the Sicilians, all of that. Right. That's why they hated the Sicilians, because the Sicilians were the Moors that stayed and fought against the so-called Italians, the so-called Guineas. You see? And then the Italians adopted the Sicilian joint in order to be seen as a real Moor. They had to trace their mother back to the first white woman that they slept with. Yeah, he loved beating them up too. Beat about Tukey Smith. He used to beat all of them up. But it all can be traced back to Charles coming a part of the Inca throne and then allowing the Europeans now an anchor to be here. This is before the colonies existed. This is in the 1500s. He's the 15th Inca emperor. It's the 1700s. They never told you that Charles was an Inca emperor because to show you that, we should have to show you he was black. But he was from a different nationality. See what I'm saying? He was under the ancient Roman side, who now was taking over the Moorish side. You see? And he, like his family and them, were connected to the House of Anjou and the House of GULLIBLE, and they were the ones that invoked the Draconian methods into their religious and societal practices, and then established a society that gave them the right to do that in secret, all to produce the power that they basically have let run amok, that has led to all of the crap that we're dealing with today. And that's the truth. So, as much as it's the white man, it's these Negroes that helped put him in position to make that happen. And it was Negroes from every part of the planet work with these European Negroes to do that. And then when they all fell, that was it. And the white man been scrambling to hide all of this from everybody ever since. Remember, Salah ad-Din took Jerusalem back away from them, which was Peru, away from them in 1187. See what I'm saying? Back then, Morocco was here. How do we know that? Because they signed the Treaty of Peace of Friendship with the Sultan of Morocco, traveled from one end to the other, and signed it on Lake Erie. There's no mention of him crossing the Atlantic to do so. So somebody lying, and it ain't us. So for the Indian Country Act, or the Indian country thing, to fall under the 11th thing, this brings us back to the Crusades, which again shows you that the titles and the treaties is still in effect. So everything we Moors been saying is still coming out to be true. Islam? Anyone else? Anybody else wants to hit me up, please do so at houseofbell@hotmail.com, and we'll definitely get into it. You know what I'm saying? Lastly, so just as we close it out, you can read, it says, from the House of Representatives, Friday, January 3rd, 1845, in regards to the annexation of Texas, because they couldn't annex it because it already existed, the stupendous deserts between the Nueces and the Bravo rivers, the national boundaries between the Anglo-Saxon and the Mauritanian races. It's the Moors, it's the ancient ones, us. There ends the valley of the West, the Orient. Orient means Moorish America. There Mexico begins. Thence beyond the Bravo begin the Moorish people and their Indian associates, to whom Mexico properly belongs, who should not cross that vast desert and would go across. Because you see, look at the jurisdiction. Remember the map I showed you? It's the same thing. They didn't have no power. The Moors in the north was outnumbered. So they had to use Caucasians to bolster their numbers, because all of the country still was a part of the old way of doing things, which was the old Moorish Empire. Morocco or the Maghreb, Al-Aqsa, whatever you want to call it. See what I'm saying? So again, this is all coded and Freemason and all of that crap. That's why we got to do the knowledge specifically to that. See, it's the same area carved out on both maps, you see? They say Mexico comes from the term Temistan. They refer to Montezuma as the Temistian king. Temistian or the Temistian or Timist is the little thing that connects the tassel to the fez. Look it up. The Temistan became Mexican. That's why in the paintings of the Battle of Santa, what do you call it, Cinco de Mayo, you see everybody in the red Temistans, the red Mexicans. Yep. And lastly, this is Muhammad II coming in, taking Istanbul away from the devil. Yeah, Islam, big up to him. And all of the authors that have been saying it. They said Horace Butler was crazy. They ain't saying that now. All right. So, yeah, everybody can hit me up at houseofl@hotmail.com. And if you have any other questions, just let me know. All right. Yes, or what they call a war between the ancients and the moderns. That's what the book Ancient and Moderns was about, really, with David and Ritchie. How they was concealing the true black nobility and replacing them with white people. In ruina eos Romam mortis, pax et amor, Perconium malut ordis, Magnus.